Conscious Thought, episode 65, August 15, 2025. Exploring the concept Heart of My Heart. Christina Herlufsen's Synergetics Research Project. My growing interest in the concept Heart of My Heart stems from an intuitively inspired appreciation for the closest connection to all that was otherwise accredited, with some vaguest sense of its sublime conceptioning beyond any false premises, inaccurate correlation that typically depends on an artist's ability to illustrate the heart, as in the Sacred Heart. It renders a permanent association with the human organ that pumps blood through the circulatory system as defined in Oxford University Press Dictionary and Thesaurus by rhythmic contraction and dilation. Herein, though, the primary interest concerns the potential comprehension and eventual applicability to UIVMOFCH, universe, isotropic, vector matrix, operational field, cosmic hierarchy. Within the scope of consciously coordinated thought and language, while imagining resetting the world stage with a differently originating referential basis of reality. My metaphysical intellect continues along this train of thought by comparing omni-rational intertransformable systems, the tetravolumes and quantum modules, which are energy event patternings, correlating with a rudimentary awareness of metaphysical generalized conceptioning fields of thought, independent of size, whereby an otherwise planar configuration by a tile layer covering the floor with precisely measured artistic geometries, for example, does not require knowing of surfaces to volumes and volumes to surface ratios. The heart, in this special case depiction, is related to newest awareness of the rhombic dodecahedron while not losing sight of anticipatory design science familiarity with the vector equilibrium. In any case, it could be the last thing that anyone would consider relevantly to the depth of omni-rational thought compared to the most superficial, wishful, prayerful accreditation by the human imagination's heartfelt love of the indescribable supreme intelligence that traditionally is referred to by a wide-spreading, highly competitive sound word for the imagined deity. In that process, there as yet is no conceptual model for the human imagination to conceptually formulate what in truth is not a reconfigured image of any human being, any anatomical part of a human being. Even though every human being is designed in principle by a universe, eternal, omniscient mind, with a brain, a mind, a heart that pumps blood by rhythmical contraction and dilation, no one could possibly be a manifest similarity to the concept God. Logically correlating functions of pumping, contraction, and expansion, pulsation, inward and outward, and oscillation, circumferential, as well as awareness of pulsation, the vector equilibrium being the nearest thing humans will ever know to eternity and God, Yom, which is the zero phase of conceptual integrity inherent in the positive and negative asymmetries. Those asymmetries propagate the problems of consciousness evolution. Such metaphysical generalized conceptioning applies to the individual awareness of our synergetically informed 21st century humanity who has barely figured out to what generalized principle for systemic thought to reference with respect to conceptualizing the concept heart of my heart, now identified with the rhombic dodecahedron correlating with vector equilibrium, since at the heart of it is the ball in the center of the rhombic dodecahedron at the core of the one sphere all by itself, writes R. Buckminster Fuller in a Synergetics Dictionary, explained thus to E.J. Applewhite at EJA's home in Washington, D.C., February 24, 1972. This specifically concerns preferring to acknowledge anticipatory design science and nature with UIVMOFCH and metaphysical generalized conceptioning fields of thought, all of which are vastly different from obsolete PRJWBCHM, politics, religion, justice, war, belief, complex, hierarchical matrix. That matrix emanates from the womb of permitted ignorance and has kept the always partially overlapping generations of humans in world populations in a supposedly inescapable, perpetually ignorant education that nonetheless is slave mentality conditioning. While it may seem impossible to clarify the R factor's harmful powers of persuasion for controlling multi-billions of indoctrinated humans, the results are clearly shown over time once they are taken into the fold. It subjects their imaginations, inherent abilities to formulate conceptually, to the authoritative dogma. Thereafter, the individual curiosity is not spontaneously inclined to consider their natural propensities to generalize concepts referentially to the most economical way systems of nature can behave. Such potential clarity also differentiates relevance from irrelevance, correlating to humans only depending on trial and error explored survival stratagems. The R factor setbacks know no end as the indoctrinated subjugation spreads like a contagion, affecting every subsequent generation without a physical cure, as segments of the subjected humanity alienate their own consciousness evolution from potential awareness of general systems thinking, technically supplanting this potential, perpetuating subconsciously illogical configurations, inducing retrograde harmful functioning instead. Functioning thus as a follower of the belief seems unrelated to least obvious correlations with respect to mental, emotional, physical, and psychological health, happiness, eliminating poverty and squalor, even within vastly overpopulated regions. Those socioeconomic quagmires can be reconsidered, where anticipatory design science and the synergetics explorations in the geometry of thinking are replete with conceptual models of nature's coordinate system. Synergetics' information and relatedness provide every logical reason to realize the inherited detrimental points of the PRJWBCHM's exhausting irrelevance for those amongst us who simply cannot abide by its inability to omni-rationally solve local problems. The infliction has been going on for centuries despite the charitable aspects of the R factor in particular, which technically, literally, inevitably is interrelated and interdependent on politics, justice, war, and money of the PRJWM. Politics, religion, justice, war, money, thereby devising a quasi-essentiality regardless of the sincerest devoted intention to help, not hinder, what can only be accomplished in forward time as modifications of angles and frequencies anyway. Neither the PRJWBCHM nor the PRJWM explains, nor accredits, metaphysical conceptualizing exponential powering as a mind does, for instance. When metaphysical intellects generalize conceptioning fields of systemic thought, reconsider the rhombic dodecahedron's sixth powering, where all the perpendiculars to its internal truncations are of the tetrahedron. Even as intellect initially observes the illustrations of the rhombic dodecahedron as a united sphere shown in the Synergetics Dictionary of the A and B quantum modules, which some of us already know are energy modules, and is viewed at the peak from above, arrayed around a united sphere represents the proton model, we may tend to find those triangles meaningless, not associating with anything as familiar as words and symbols that supposedly represent meaningful objectives, adored as heartfelt associations with the deity. For the most part, indoctrinated humans tend to cultivate incurious resignation, preferring the superficial symbol, further denying omni-rational objectives that could as easily relate to a conceptuality of the proton and neutron models that we can also view from yet an action-reaction resultant perspective in Synergetics figure 935.23. Since nature always starts over again with the isotropic vector matrix, wherein energy is not lost, just not available, and as we are learning, is the heart of the vector equilibrium in the center of the rhombic dodecahedron, we are given a core to imagine, from which 12 rhombic dodecahedrons around one central rhombic dodecahedron gets the vector equilibrium, thereby permitting us to investigate nuclear symmetries while accrediting integration that Bucky Fuller found discreetly controls the coordination of complex interactions. Imaginably, if complex interactions conceptually are knowable as cycles, we ought to be rethinking the basis of our anticipatory realities in a voluntary self-educating eagerness to accredit metaphysical intellect's generalized conceptioning, especially since Synergetics provides the all-space filling models that a child can imagine, thereby stimulating its integral anticipatory design science propensities, such incentives simply are not present in the PRJWBCHM reality bases, no matter how many increasing numbers of followers, nor number of stained glass and domed edifices are built now everywhere in the world for gathering members, as are a flock of sheep, with no mind of their own and brains, neuronal circuits. The cerebral circuitry design is for imagining and thinking of thought as an evolving being, one of more than 8 billion humans on Earth. We are the coexisting human species endowed with an ability to do our own thinking, respecting a world that can work for everybody, while accrediting our innate faculties that are independently operating, specifically for anticipatory design science projections that are conceptual, independent of size, time, space, sizing. For any person's particular interest that can be individually studied in this entire regard, see Synergetics Table of Contents. Until next time, thank you from Christina Herlofson.